So, Mr. Trinity, aka Will Forrest. Before we get into this week's podcast, we've had a few concerned listeners, concerned viewers, concerned tweeters message us at Talk of the Trinity, at Talk Trinity, in respect of a few controversial opinions that may have been publicised by our fine Twitter page during the course of the last week regarding Leon Bailey being injured when he maybe was not injured and only had cramp. But perhaps more controversially, the suggestion of Tyrone Mings playing defensive midfield. What have you got to say to our literally tens of listeners, viewers, subscribers in response to those scurrilous suggestions?
First of all, I was just tweeting. Really, I didn't realise that we'd get the backlash from those 3 or 4 followers that we would do. Obviously, the tweets that I put out for them have, I feel, been taken the wrong way. I never meant to hurt, upset anybody. I never meant to cause any distress, any frustration. It really was just in regards to Leon Bailey, it was something I'd heard. I didn't get a chance to do my research. I was worried that he was injured, and I wanted people to know that he may be injured so that we could well wish him, but obviously he wasn't. And in my role as a podcaster, I should be telling people 100% the truth and not fabricating things. So I apologise for that. Regarding Tyrone Mings, I didn't think it was a daft suggestion, in my honest opinion. Football's all about opinions. I just wanted to convey mine. Again, I didn't mean to distress anybody. I brought massive shame on my family.
Haven't left the house, have they?
My son's up to have a few days off school because of it. My daughter locks herself away in a room, sobbing uncontrollably, and my wife sits at the other end of the sofa and might even look at me when I laugh at the trials and tribulations that people are going through on I'm a Celebrity featuring David Ginola. I'm just really, really sorry, and in the future I'll think twice before I suggest putting Emmy Buendia as a sweeper or suggesting that Matty Cash should get out of the club.
Yep.
I'm sorry I've let you down also, and our tens of listeners.
Well, can you confirm that this week's edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast will be totally banal and devoid of any controversial opinion or statement?
Yeah, of course. That's what we're aiming for here at this podcast. So yeah, of course.
Was a great hit by Mings, though, wasn't it? Further up the field for that second goal.
Mate, quality. I reckon AD loved it.
Welcome to the Talk of the Trinity podcast. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I'm Baz Barrett. With me is Will Forrest as always. But today, joining us to talk about Villa and the Brighton game, we've got a very special guest with us. And it's not very often you get to say that you have a captain of Aston Villa on your podcast. So we're really pleased to be joined on this episode by Connor Sherry of, as I said, Villa captain. I don't want to steal his thunder anymore because I can't put words in the captain's mouth. So, firstly, thanks for joining us, Connor. Much appreciated. Just tell us a little about your experience as captain of Villa and kind of a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Okay. To be honest, number one, it's such a great honour to be being captain of Villa Village account. And I've been captain now about 3 or 4 years, which is like amazing, and it's a massive pride when I put on the armband, especially wearing this Villa shirt when it comes to match days playing. It's just a great feeling, and with me, I'm like a proper leader, just lead by example, and try and motivate my teammates and just try and win matches and keep clean sheets at the back. Because with me, I play right back, I do, so I'm like a typical like Alan Hutton in the way at times, but but yeah, So I've been playing for Villa now for 17 or 18 years now, and what helped me the most is one of my football coaches actually, who's in charge of it all, and his name's Nigel Mathod, and I have known him since the age of 5, because I started playing this football in 2005. And he really honestly helped me a lot in my younger days, and especially now still just keep learning me things a lot in football, like football playing wise, and what I can do more to improve as a captain for my team. And I was looking forward to playing the rest of the season, but unfortunately on the last Wednesday night, I went into A&E because found out from a nurse I've got a knee ligament in my left knee, and unfortunately I'm going to be out for quite some time. I don't know how long it will be, but all I need to do is just try and stay positive and try and do exercises if I can, if I'm not in pain, and hopefully one day just come back stronger and just get back out on the pitch, because at the minute I'm just missing it badly. So I'm just going to stay positive at the minute. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so with that, thinking about getting back to playing again, you've probably seen in the papers that Steven Gerrard has allegedly said that you can't have puddings, you can't have tomato sauce and stuff like that at the Villa. Are you laying off that as well? Are you saying, Mom, no, I'm not having any ice cream tonight, I'm recovering from injury because I'm going to get back as strong as Alan Hutton? Is that what you're saying? Or
well, the funny thing is, like, they just let us eat whatever, but only just keep a certain diet when it comes to like before playing matches. But yeah, they don't really ban things. But to be honest, with the professional Villa team, it's good in the way they actually have stopped that a few things, so like fizzy drinks and puddings and all that stuff, because it would just affect the players' weight, and especially when they're on the pitch. Because there's been a few times I have played on the Villa Park pitch for training, and you think to yourself, doesn't look that big when you play on there, but no, it is honestly constant. It's like forward there and back every time, and they just need to try and stay fit, and just hopefully now for a good season. Because don't get me wrong, with Dean Smith, he's done amazing for us for the last 3 years. He got us at the start when he was Villa manager. He was obviously 14 because we were struggling at the time in the Championship, but when he came, changed us massively, and we just went all the way, like winning on I think 10-game unbeaten one, if I remember, a few years ago, and then obviously got to Wembley, which was an amazing day, and obviously we got promoted, which was a great achievement from Dean Smith in his first season. But then obviously when it came to the first season back in the Premier League, I knew at the time it was going to be difficult to get back, because there was a lot of decent Premier League teams, and we just signed at the time not really experienced players in the Premier League, which was a bit of a risk, don't get me wrong. But eventually, when it was before all that lockdown happened, I was in so bad form, and I just thought to myself, it's not looking great. But then, obviously, when that COVID came and when everyone unfortunately couldn't go to the matches, I think Villa then just hit the gas running, and we just managed to survive on the last day at West Ham. But yeah, this season, it's been weird, to be honest. We've conceded a lot of goals from set pieces, which I wasn't really happy about at the time, and I thought the defending was bad. Literally, there was no communication between the players, and it was like literally arguing at each other at times, and it was just not looking great at all. And I think the big losses in our Villa team at the time was John Terry and Jack Grealish. Them two was massive for us, because number one with Terry, he kept the defenders absolutely solid at the back. But then when he left, it changed massively. But you know, I like with Dean Smith, I just like. Unfortunately, I know he got the sack, but I just wish him all the best in his new club, Norwich, and I hope he does well there. But yeah, with Steven Gerrard, when I heard about Steven Gerrard's appointment, I thought decent signing, because you know, just look at his record when he was at Rangers for 3 years. You know, won every game, kept loads of clean sheets. You know, it was unbeaten throughout the Scottish season, and Gerrard managed to win his very first trophy in his manager career. But yeah, so if I look at his stats, it's very impressive, and I think that's why Villa got him, really. And also, what's the main thing is attacking football. With me, that's one of my favourite football positions. So definitely attacking from me every time, and I love to be entertained. I like to sit in my seat, watch the games at Villa. Yeah, I am definitely looking. I think it'll be a good season under Gerrard now, because he wants to get the best out of the players now, 100%. He wants to have like determination, 100%. Just get stuck in a lot, do not mess around. You know, it's just good to have a manager like Gerrard, and obviously he's been there before. I know he's never won the Premier League before, but he's got experience and he knows how to play in that league. And yeah, I think I am confident for this weekend's game coming up. I definitely think we'll get a result at Crystal Palace.
Well, I think we definitely saw an improvement, didn't we, on Saturday, and we saw that the players wanted it more. Maybe they embodied their inner Steven Gerrard a little bit. Baz, you weren't too sure about Gerrard at first, really, were you? You were sort of hopeful that he'd be a good manager, though you'd have preferred Ten Hag. You were on that white picket fence a little bit as well. What did you think of the game Saturday? Were you impressed by Gerrard, or is the jury still out for you?
Well, firstly, being as though we haven't been able to say this very often over the last month or so, and in case listeners have been away for a while and aren't aware of the score until listening to our podcast, Villa 2, Brighton 0, 3 points. So great news for us. As regards Gerrard, you're right in terms of when the discussions were taking place after Dean Smith left about who to come in. I wasn't entirely sold on Gerrard in the sense of I could see why Gerrard would want to come to Villa. I mean, it's a massive jump for him, a massive opportunity. And in order for him to get, a certain other job that has been linked with Gerrard for the last few years, in order for him to be able to jump into that job, he needed some Premier League experience. And realistically, Villa was the biggest opportunity he was going to get, I think, obviously biased. And there is kind of a feeling with Gerrard. I saw him in the first press conference they did after he was appointed, saying the right things, in terms of, obviously he was always going to be asked about Liverpool, and he was, and he said what he needed to say, to be honest, in answer to that question, and he was dealt with it perfectly fine. And, in order for him to improve his, he's obviously, as you mentioned, Connor, already got a good reputation as a manager. In order for that reputation to be maintained and improved, he has to do a good job at Villa. Where that leads in the future, we can speculate, but we don't know. So it's not a situation he's going to come in and just kind of sit on his hands and do nothing for 3 years and hope that the phone rings. But in terms of Saturday, there was, the questions about what formation is he going to be playing, what type of approach, kind of you mentioning in terms of wanting to see attacking football under Gerrard. And that was one of the most visible things for me in terms of pushing those fullbacks forward and taking the game to Brighton. And we allowed Brighton to have quite a lot of possession, really, but it was possession in areas which they weren't really doing very much with. So, I think there's two centre-backs, things Webster, Dunk, I think, maybe in the other one. They had the most touches of anybody on the field, but I don't mind the opposition centre-backs having touches, kind of in their own half. I mean, that's precisely where you want people to be having touches. So the way Gerrard set up, attacking Wiseman, especially, the expectation for me would have been to use Matt Cash, go down the right, but really it looked more we were going down the left, in Target, McGinn kind of attacking that left-hand side, which bit of a surprise potentially because, well, there's been a few words about Target during the course of the season, probably on this podcast as well, in terms of whether his place in the team is quite as secure as others may be. But yeah, to answer your question, Will, in terms of Gerrard, I mean, it stopped the rot in terms of performance. You could see what he's trying to do. He's only had a week of training and players were on international duty, or a lot of the players were, so you're not getting the opportunity to work with them day in, day out ahead of the game. But did what we needed to do. I'm a big fan always of managers running up and down the touchline after goals. He didn't quite get as far as Mourinho did for Porto against Man U, but he gave him a good run for his money. Yeah, I'm all for it. And, in terms of, you can't argue with a win. I mean, we'll get onto the performance a bit more now. It wasn't a vintage performance, in all honesty, but, we never particularly looked threatened, I don't think, by Brighton. And I thought it was a comfortable win in the end, which is what you were hoping for, I think. I mean, the reception from the fans is always going to be good. You're hoping to get that new manager bounce. And largely we did. I mean, you mentioned, Will, in terms of Gerrard was your man. You were vocal wanting him before he was appointed. What did you see on Saturday? How did you feel? Did you feel vindicated, or is it a bit early for you to quite order the ticket top parade through Birmingham City Centre yet, proclaiming your genius?
Well, I've already ordered the bus anyway to do that. But to be honest with you, it's a bit of both. It does feel a bit of vindication because we've won a match for the first time in 5 games. We've beaten Brighton, who have been a bit of a bogey team for us, really, in the fact that we've beaten once out of our previous 4 Premier League games. And at the Amex last season, well, Emi Martinez had the game of his life, didn't he, really? Even more so than the Copa America final, in many ways, with the number of saves he made. But it was nice to see the pressing from the players. It was nice to see that they put 100% effort in. And it was nice to see individual performances stepped up from certain players. I think we mentioned John McGinn a little while ago as one of our players of the season. And I think we jinxed him in some ways because he's blown a bit of hot and cold since the Man United game. But he was back to his bustling self, getting his big arse in the way of Brighton's players. You look at that second goal, how he turns back inside and puts the cross in that leads to Mings' goal. You see Ollie Watkins getting back on the score sheet. Ashley Young rolled back the years for the assist for Ollie Watkins' goal. And even before that, marvellous Nakamba's composure in the box was something that you'd expect to see Andre Pirlo do for Juventus back in the day. But it was good. I mean, thinking about captains in particular, though, because we've got a captain of the Villa run, Tyrone Mings, the dedication and fight he showed to keep that ball in and play it back to John McGinn. I thought that was quite impressive, Con. And then he finished off beautifully with that right foot. What were you thinking about Mings' performance back to his best?
I know recently he wasn't to his best at all. There was a few games that he had a shock at, in my opinion. But definitely the Brighton game, fantastic performance. He was very solid at the back. He was telling the defenders and the whole team where to go on the pitch to make sure they're on it. And yeah, he created that goal. I mean, but when he crossed that ball, I think McGinn, wasn't it? Oh no, McGinn crossed it to someone, and then Tyrone Mings just managed to get there on time. His right foot, what a goal it was. And I thought to myself at the time when I was watching the game, I thought, oh, please don't miss. But I was buzzing when it went in. The scenes from where I was sitting was electric. everyone was like literally jumping onto each other. It was just an amazing feeling, and it felt really good against the Villa win. And obviously what you said earlier, well, they only won one game after 5 games. But yeah, this is many more wins to come now, hopefully from Steven Gerrard. So let's see what happens in the next few games. Yeah.
So I suppose in terms of, you could say adding a bit of balance, we've focused on the positives, something that may be seen as a slight negative, perhaps. We've talked previously about the Ings and Watkins partnership, especially under Dean Smith, where the 3-5-2 formation was designed to have them both up front at the same time. Gerrard starts with Ings up front in that central role, Watkins on the left-hand side. Suspicions that Ings wasn't fully fit, but Watkins moved into the centre, got himself a goal. He looked quite pleased with himself after that. For you moving forwards, Connor, would you stick with the 3 up front that Gerrard played with Watkins on the left and Ings on the right, or do you think the two can work together in a front partnership, just the two of them?
To be honest, I wasn't quite sure with Emi Buendia, to be honest, and attacking me, because I just think he hasn't been playing up to his standards, because we have bought him a lot of money, but it just hasn't been there at the minute. And I think it's because he's kind of a bigger club. Don't lie, I'm not disrespecting Norwich or anything, but obviously when you play for a bigger club, there's more expectations from his level, what he needs to achieve on the pitch. Well, at the minute he's struggling, so I'm hoping he can play well soon under Gerrard with his advice. But with attacking wise, I think Ollie Watkins is definitely more better, I think, on the left hand side, because he looks, in my opinion, he looks being there more than what he is in central. But with Danny Ings, it's hard to say for his last few games. I think he's been quite isolated, in my opinion. But I'm hoping soon he can get goals. So I think probably in January we might need another striker, just in case if Danny Ings or Watkins get injured. Just see what happens to it in the January transfer window. But I have heard a few rumours already about Glenn Kamara, Ryan Kent from Rangers, and even Basuma from Brighton. They're the kind of targets at the minute who we after in January, and I think that would be definitely a good sign to help us more to grow up in the table.
Yeah, would you be happy with any of those 3, Will? Basuma, Kent, or Kamara?
Yeah, to be honest, I'll take the 3 of them if I was a manager. I would definitely pick Glenn Kamara and CDM, and then Ryan Kent. Oh, I think in attacking mid, I think with Ryan Kent. And then who else did I mention? I forgot. I mentioned that last person.
Basuma.
Yeah, definitely. That's it. Yeah, playing in the centre mid.
What about you, Will? Would you take those 3 like Connor would?
I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't. No, I can see exactly why Connor would, and I can see why Gerrard would potentially go after 2 of them. But I'd leave Kent and Kamara alone. Basuma, I think, is a fantastic player, and providing that nothing nasty comes out of the woodwork there with him, that he's the type of controlling central midfielder that we need. And maybe now that we've got Gerrard in, as we discussed in the last podcast, Baz, that might be a bit more appealing for him to come and join Aston Villa. I think there's other positions that we need to cover a little bit more, such as we need a top quality left back. I've mentioned many times Rafael Guerreiro and how much I'd love him, and I see that we've also been linked today with a left back, and that was Stuttgart's Borna Sosa. I don't know much about him, but I know he's got a lot of assists already this season. I think he's 9 in 12 games, contribution-wise. Strikers, though, where Con's mentioned the 3rd one, I think we only need a 3rd striker if Cameron Archer isn't going to stick around. I've got full faith that Danny Ings will do it. He's missed 2 games in the league, so he's played in 9. He's got 3 goals, and he's set up at least 2 goals now. So that's 5 goal contributions in 9 games. It's better than a 1 in 2 ratio. He's obviously doing something right. He just needs to click a bit better. But I could see his role potentially changing a bit to more of that Rangers Jermaine Defoe false 9 sort of a role. What about you, Baz? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think Ings needs time. I mean, I think as in terms of Saturday, as I mentioned, I don't think he was fully fit, which doesn't help. I think it may be a slightly statement pick from Gerrard just to show we're going 4-3-3. We're going to be doing something different. In terms of Bissouma, I thought he was arguably Brighton's best player on Saturday. So he'd walk into our midfield, being honest. Yeah. I think in terms of Nakamba, you mentioned, had a very good game. We've taken a bit of stick, shall we say, Will, for mentioning that Nakamba should be on the Villa team sheet, but he's the best of what we've got in that defensive midfield role, I think, currently. In that true defensive, just get the ball from somebody else and pass it to somebody on our team who knows kind of what they're doing creatively. But even I, well, not even I am. Bissouma walks all over Nakamba. I don't think that's kind of too disrespectful, but he's just, as you mentioned, the Gerrard comparisons. He hasn't won the European Cup yet, Bissouma, but we might help get him into Europe if he comes and joins us. But yeah, that's the type of upgrade that we need, to really kind of push for, a European place, which is by the chairman, the owner's actions in getting rid of Smith when they did and bringing Gerrard in. That is what they're looking for, and they're looking to get there quick. So that is the type of player to bring in, and mentioned with Liverpool, funnily enough, previously. So if we were able to steal a march and bring that type of caliber of player in, then that bodes well for the rest of the season. And as you mentioned earlier, kind of hoping that we have a good run at the end of the season. Where would you say would be a good end of the season in terms of position wise? Do you think it's too late for a run at Europe?
Wow, to be honest, we're only in November, so we've got a lot of time for the season ahead. So, if you have a solid season now, what we've got with Gerrard. So I think probably towards 8th or 7th, I think.
Well, 7th gets us the new European competition that name escapes me. So it'll be another thing to celebrate on your bus, Will, that we're having around town soon enough. You heard it here first. A great season for Villa to look forward to, and the dizzying heights of 7th. So just going to say thanks very much for joining us, Connor, to give us your thoughts on all things Brighton. Much appreciated. As a spoiler alert, we are going to be doing a full episode on ability counts and your story in more detail later on in the season. So stick around for that, listeners. But in the meantime, cheers for joining us. Much appreciated. And good luck in the recovery from injury. And if you can get some ice cream, stock up. Moving on then from the past and the wonderful world of ice cream to the future, which may or may not have ice cream. If I've got anything to do with it, it will do. But we're going to be talking now about Villa Palace, Saturday, 3:00 down at Selhurst Park. What are you thinking, Will? I think this could be defined as could go either way, is my initial starter for 10.
Yeah, completely agree. I think it's got all the ingredients to be a goal glut of the game, hasn't it, really, especially after Palace's result at the weekend and a nice little late 2-0 win. I think it's going to be an absolute barnstormer. I don't know where I got that word from, but I think it's going to be a barnstormer. I think there's going to be goals galore. So I'm confident that we'll be able to defend well. We may not be able to keep a clean sheet, but I think we come away from South London with a victory, and I do honestly feel that Steven Gerrard makes it 2 from 2 in regards to wins. And funny enough, over 70% of the people who voted on our Twitter poll at Talk Trinity for that Twitter page, they agree. What about you? Are you one of those?
Well, as you said, the fans are confident in terms of going away to Palace. Palace are similar to Brighton in terms of you can interpret their run and kind of their recent results and the stats one of both ways. In terms of they've already lost twice this season. You can say they've won 2 out of the last 3. Beat Man City, beat Wolves, both in the top 6. Very good results. You mentioned their last game, 3-3 away at Burnley. That was a humdinger, to throw another descriptive word in for games with lots of goals. But after Villa beat Brighton, Villa have actually won more games than Palace this season, which is, I'm going to say, remarkable in terms of based on what we've been doing. I mean, I think Palace are 10th in the league and been very impressive in terms of Vieira coming in the summer. There was a feeling of, is this the right job at the right time? Because under Roy Hodgson, stability, I think, is the word you could use to describe them in that kind of 14th place kind of bracket for like pretty much all of Hodgson's reign, really, kind of not the most exciting team on occasion to watch. It's going to get somewhere between 40 and 50 points. Probably not going to go down, not going to qualify for Europe. A lot of older players, one of the oldest, if not the oldest team in the league under Hodgson. So Vieira coming in, younger coach, I suppose almost by default in comparison, but, kind of somebody without the experience of the Premier League as a manager. Certainly had a little bit of experience of the league as a player, shall we say, with Vieira, and also coaching at Man City. But I was interested to see how it was going to go, because I thought that this could go quite wrong quite quick if they didn't get off to a good start. And fair play to Vieira and Palace. They are doing better than I thought they would. They have the tendencies you mentioned. They've got a lot of draws, I think 7. Can't hold on. Arsenal away in the last minute. Arsenal came back for the draw. Burnley on Saturday. I mean, it was 4 minutes into the second half, so it wasn't quite the last minute surrender. But holding on to Leeds is a bit of a issue for Palace. You mentioned goals. Goals isn't an issue for Palace. They've got that attacking play set. And as you mentioned, it is going to be a goal fest. And hopefully, in terms of from a Villa perspective, it's not Christian Benteke getting amongst the goals. Scored 2 on Saturday against Burnley. Also got Conor Gallagher in the centre midfield, called up for the England squad recently, having a real breakout season, you could call it, at Selhurst Park. Are you worried about either of those two, or any other Palace players of concern?
Well, I think we would be very naive not to be concerned by Wilfried Zaha. He's been exceptional for the last number of years, well, since he's been at Palace, really. He had that ill-fated spell at Man United, but apart from that, he's come back to Selhurst Park. He's got the fans on their feet. He's very much for them what Jack Grealish was for us, wasn't he? That type of player who everybody hated because he'd roll around on the floor, he'd get fouled, he'd probably get touched and go down, and Palace would be saying, well, that's a foul if he's got touched and momentum, like I used to do with Grealish, really. Zaha was definitely could cause us problems, and I think if he's on the right-hand side against target, he could cause us more problems than he would do for Matty Cash. Though saying that, Cash has struggled previously against some of the trickier wingers. You mentioned Benteke. He's just hit the ground running, hasn't he? Under Vieira, really. He's got a few goals this season. Seems to be getting back to his best as he reaches the twilight of his career, maybe 31, 32 years old. Another ex-villain, of course, being Jordan Ayew, who's been a bit more revitalised under Palace over the last year or so. Scored some crucial goals for them. Got a goal of the season contender, I'm sure it was last season, if not the season before. They've got Edouard, who's done quite well as well. fantastic debut against Tottenham. It's the only time I've seen Palace this season, and they absolutely destroyed Tottenham at home in that 3-0 win. But I think their key player, and the one who you mentioned, is most definitely Conor Gallagher. He is fantastic. Breakthrough season, you're spot on. And if he keeps it up, he'll be going to Qatar for the World Cup. He's been absolute quality. He's the type of player who could easily get into the Villa team, into the central midfield, I think. Very much like, not like Bazuma in the way he plays, but of that quality where he'd walk into the team. And I think it's a testament to him that Chelsea have refused to put any sort of permanent option into any of the loan deals when Conor Gallagher's gone out on loan. He most definitely, as that box-to-box midfielder, a creative outlet, has the capabilities and attributes to be the danger man for us.
Yep.
Against us.
Certainly a few to look out for. In terms of my prediction, I'm going to leave it to the end when we both give our score predictions. I'm going to leave the listeners on tender hooks as regards which way I'm going to go in terms of my prediction. But mentioning the players there for Palace, also you mentioned some for Villa. Moving on to what potentially may be the Villa starting 11. We've done a very rare poll on our Twitter page. I mean, you know, we don't do very many of those, do we? On there, but we asked the fans to name their starting 11 for Saturday's game. Went with the 4-3-3 formation that we started against Brighton. So running down the starting 11, Will, who the fans gone for? Who do they think we should be playing in order to stop Conor Gallagher and all the other Palace players we mentioned?
Well, surprisingly, there's been a couple of changes to the lineup. Or when I say surprisingly, you probably would think that there might be one or two, but I don't think that they're going to be the players who you or the rest of the Villa Twitter family or Villa universe would have thought. In goal, they've gone for Emi Martinez. No surprise there.
Nope.
Potentially the best goalkeeper outside the top two, being Edison and Alisson.
Certainly back to his best, or getting back to his best now. Good saves against Brighton in the previous game. You know, he had a couple of bad games, but it's, you know, you can't have perfection kind of all the way through. So, yeah, I mean, he's certainly up there in terms of the best goalies in the leagues. Yeah, but potentially you could put him third. I mean, in terms of De Gea's having a little bit of a resurgence at the moment, but in terms of the question of who would you rather have in goal, I'd take Martinez over De Gea. And, you know, as you said, off the top of my head, it's only really Alisson and Edison who you would question before deciding whether to take Martinez or not. So, yeah, I did see in terms of a write-up of the game saying that along the lines of Martinez is decent. He's better than decent. Come on. You know, let's be. You know, we're a Villa podcast, so you're expecting generally Villa positive reviews unless it's me predicting a result. But as you said, top three goalie in the league, certainly up there, if not in the top three. Certainly Champions League in terms of quality. So literally the first name on the team sheet if you're going from the top, but no real debate with Martinez. So we've got Martinez in goal. Who have the fans got on the back four?
So the back four is actually unchanged from the Brighton game. So protecting Emi Martinez, they want to see Matty Cash on the right. They want to see Matt Targett on the left, and they want that central defensive partnership, the one that we know can play very well together, as seen last year, and two potential England candidates for Qatar next year again, Ezri Konsa and our captain, and someone who I think will stay as captain as well, Tyrone Mings. So that back four, the back four that did us so well last year, and surprisingly, Baz, and you probably would have seen this, that's the first time those four have played as a back four together since we beat Newcastle at home.
And another 2-0 home victory. And if we're going for coincidences / back tapping, The only other score I predicted correctly, I think, was the Newcastle 2-0. So obviously we need to get the back four, back five together more often, and we're going to be winning 2-0 every week. But I think in terms of that back four, it's not really too much controversy from my perspective. Clean sheet against Brighton. I mean, we've talked in various podcasts about whether Young or Target should be left back. I think we both had Young in our lineup for Brighton, but yeah, not really too many complaints from me if we're going to go with that back four. Same with you, Will?
I'd still put Ashley Young in ahead of Matt Target, and Matt Target obviously had a good enough game on Saturday. I did see that there was talk that he nearly came off on a couple of occasions, but obviously he didn't. He saw the game out. He tends to struggle against quicker players. We've seen it with Adama Traore before, and we've seen it with a couple of the other faster players. Maybe the crowd get on his back a little bit when he starts to struggle, or he gets a few nerves. So he didn't do too badly against Lamptey at the weekend, and there's not many players who are slower than him. But Ashley Young, for me, just offers that something different. I think he'd be able to manage Sahara a bit better, maybe even wind him up a little bit. We know that Ashley Young can do that. However, Steven Gerrard allegedly was very close to putting Ashley Young in the number 10 role on Saturday, and changed his mind quite late on. But yeah, it's only the one change. But then again, if you've won 2 games already with that back four, why change a winning team? Why change the defence when it did so well against Brighton and very much shut them out for the long periods of the game, despite them having 89 million% of possession?
Well, it's kind of, as you can say in all walks of life, is, that 10%, that can be the most important bit, depending what you do with it. And we were putting it in the back of the net with our possession. I mean, in terms of Brighton, didn't have much of the ball. We had the better chances, I think, and the more attacking in terms of field position, to probably butcher an American football phrase. And in terms of getting that foothold in the game, you're looking to your midfield. So 3 in midfield. Who are the fans looking for in our central positions on Saturday?
Now, this is potentially where the surprises come a little bit. Defensive midfielder, they have gone for Douglas Luiz over Nakamba, and I was a little bit shocked. Not too shocked though. Douglas Luiz is a class player. He's a Rolls Royce of a deep line playmaker, really. But when you're away from home, you sort of feel that defensive midfielder, I'm going to break it up and just play that simple pass and knock it around in Nakamba is what you'd need. But nonetheless, they've gone for Douglas Luiz, despite Nakamba's pre-assist on Saturday. They've kept John McGinn in the team. Not a surprise. What a fantastic performance from him, spraying passes, getting his arse in the way against Brighton.
Probably man of the match, I'd say. Best player on Saturday.
Back to his best, and someone who looks like they're going to enjoy life under Steven Gerrard. Gerrard rates him very highly, as we touched upon in our last podcast, which is available on YouTube and all good podcast hosting sites. The third midfielder that they voted for was Morgan Sanson, which to me came as a bit of a surprise. And by the look on your face, you're maybe a little bit surprised as well, because there was a lot of rumours on Twitter that he got 2-footed by Mickey Mouse in Disneyland Paris and wasn't going to be able to play. But there he was, and Steven Gerrard referenced what a quality player we had on the bench as well in him.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Sanson, it'd be a big call for throwing him in. I mean, he hasn't played much this season because of fitness issues, and Palace away, tricky one to get yourself up to the speed, because, some of the players we mentioned for Palace who are going to be playing if fit, they're not going to be slouching around. It's going to be a real, through the phases really quick in that centre of the park. So is Sanson going to be fully fit if he does start? That's the concern for me about playing Sanson. As I said, McGinn picks himself, I think, at this stage. Great performance on Saturday. I think when he's on form, he's one of the first names on the team sheets. No real issue in respect to that for me. Luis Nakamba, yeah, if you want a brawler, then Nakamba is the player to go for over Luis. I suppose another way of, depending how Gerrard is going to set up in terms of how much pressure we're going to look to soak up, is you mentioned Luis is kind of the more Rolls Royce terms of that defensive midfielder. If we're looking to get the ball out quickly, Luis has got a better range of passes on him than Nakamba, despite, the great assist from Nakamba you mentioned on Saturday. But if you're looking to get it forward quick, then perhaps Luis I can see how, playing devil's advocate, how he could potentially be a better option. But again, it's going to be fitness related. I mean, the sounds are good at time of recording about Luis being fit. Hopefully those turn out to be true. So I can see both points of view in terms of that. I think, again, linked to the Brighton game, one of the key kind of things from Gerrard's perspective, getting the fullbacks up. If we're going to play similarly against Palace or try and get the fullbacks attacking that far up the pitch, then perhaps I would be venturing more on your side of Nakamba just to have a bit more defensive solidarity. If we're going to have a slight tactical tweak, like, for example, if we're going to send Cash further forward or Target if he plays, or Young, depending on who plays left back, one of them goes up and the other stays back, then I'd feel slightly more comfortable about playing Luis in that role. But, in terms of quality as a footballer, then, well, yeah, I think it's safe to say Luis is the better player in that sense. But it is a horses for courses type approach. And yeah, I think we mentioned earlier on in the season, the fact that we have those options is, good for, the way the squad is going and getting everybody fit, which we mentioned was one of the key issues all season, really. No, not getting people fit. You mentioned in terms of the defence hasn't played together. Same with the midfield. Hasn't really been able to play together. My slight surprise with the Sanson pick would be Ramsey. I think he deserves a run in the team. I mean, based on recent performances, in terms of, he didn't run the show against Brighton. I think that's fair to say, but I think that high tempo game, quick transitions, I think Ramsey may be slightly better suited for Saturday. So I personally would go for Ramsey over Sanson.
Most definitely. I think it'd be very harsh on JJ to be dropped from the team. He obviously came off on Saturday, and the substitutions were inspired in many ways, but he's got that energy about him. He's not afraid to hustle and bustle as well, so he can drop in and tackle. He's very much a number 8, really, isn't he? A box to box who will press forward, will carry the ball, will try and make things happen, and we'll need that against Palace, who will want to attack us, will want to get goals, and if they're opening up gaps, then Ramsey will be someone who can hopefully exploit those. I can see from what you were saying about Douglas Luiz, his range of passing, the pass against Man United for Ollie Watkins in particular, it's fantastic if he can spray that ball around. So we do have Tyrone Mings who can play a pass as well, and I still stand by my case for saying that he's a good passer for the ball, whether that's as a defensive midfielder, which quite a few people and hosts of other podcasts disagreed with, but that's for them to discuss on theirs, and football's all about opinions, whether you think you're right or wrong. It's, this is what this platform's for as well. But no, I think you're right. JJ, very unfair on him if he was to be dropped, and quite shocking really that Sanson got picked ahead of him. Maybe everybody was at work and they didn't get a chance to vote.
Maybe, or maybe they're looking at the potential which was on display at Marseille, but largely hasn't been seen at Villa so far. Maybe they're hoping that Sanson will roll back the years. Although in your defence, Will, how many defensive midfielders are able to hit a ball as well as Mings did for the second goal? So maybe we should get him further up the pitch. We'll throw out there for another day. But speaking of getting goals and getting further up the pitch, moves us nicely on to our attacking three for the game on Saturday. Who have the fans gone for there? Any more surprise selections?
Not so much a surprise, I don't think. But they've gone with Emi Buendia, still starting in the starting three. I think a lot of people see the potential there with him. And I tweeted out the other day that he's reminiscent to Petrov when he started. Do you remember Petrov's first game away at West Ham when he absolutely ran the show, destroyed them, and then he dropped off, and then he got dropped, and he came back into the team as a defensive midfielder. Now, I'm not saying that everyone deal will come back into the team as a defensive midfielder, but he's obviously hasn't quite clicked for him yet. He's still forming relationships with players on the team. I mean, you play that outside of the right boot through ball to Danny Ings towards the end of your first season, and Danny Ings knows exactly where it's going, and he's probably getting there before the goalkeeper and getting the shot off. And it's nice as well to see that he was frustrated that he came off, or he punched the bench, he had a fit, he did this, he did that. People were lauding Samson for throwing a bottle the other day. It's exactly the same thing. It's obviously a bit better than throwing a bottle. But Buendia's in there. Ollie Watkins is in, but Ollie Watkins is the striker.
Okay.
Not surprising. He scored the goal as the striker, even though he was cutting inside from the left, and it looked more like El Ghazi was in the middle at that point. Fantastic goal as well. You know, Gerard said it was a world-class goal, and it was a great finish. It's got to be a contender for goal of the month, you'd have thought, and one of our goal of the seasons. And on the left wing, they're putting their faith back into Leon Bailey. The fans have seen enough of him. They know that what he can bring, the greatest winger they've ever seen. Oh Bailey. Very unlucky not to score for us on Saturday with that fantastic volley against Jason Steele, who pulled off a blinding save to keep it out. He pulled off a couple of great saves, to be fair.
Yep,
but they're going Buendia, Watkins and Bailey. Is that what you pick against Palace? Is Bailey ready to start a match again? I mean, we did get it wrong. Hands held up about him being injured. He wasn't injured. It was a rumour. I put it out there very quickly. Unfortunately, there are a few other things going on. I'm not going to go into my personal life too much about that. And there was a little bit of backlash for a couple of tweets like as well by other podcasters. But hey ho, there you go. Again, that's up to you what you do. Got it wrong. Bailey came on. He obviously went off with cramp for Jamaica. Is he ready to start for the Villa at the moment?
I would like most Villa fans to get him in the team as quick as possible. I can see why, because of his 20, 30 minute bursts when he comes off the bench. He's obviously got an eye for goal in terms of getting in the right place to have the chances. I mean, so you mentioned the chance he had on Saturday, great save. You know, you got to be in there. It's like with a few players, comes down to fitness, really. I mean, if he's fully fit, then I think you have to get him in there at some point, you know, relatively quickly, just to get him up to speed. Because if he is fit and he's not playing, then that's going to have an effect on, you know, maintaining and ever getting to that match fitness level. Again, we mentioned Ings. Is he going to be fit for Saturday? There's obviously, you know, hasn't quite clicked in terms of the Ings and the Watkins partnership. Buendia as well. I mean, you can't write him off. I mean, well, purely for accounting purposes, you can't write him off. You know, in terms of a record buy. I think the tax man would be having some issues with that. But yeah, as you say, it's early on. So on the assumption that everybody is fit, then it's a tricky one. I'd be tempted to have Watkins on the left, Bailey on the right, and Ings in the centre if they're all fit, because I think they're in terms of attacking wise, their best three players. As whether systematically that is going to work, and whether Crystal Palace's away is the right game to try that, I'm having that internal dialogue myself, kind of as we speak. So, yeah, with trepidations, let's get those square pegs in round holes. Let's get Watkins, Ings, and Bailey, that front three. Let's see how they get on in there if they're all fit. But again, as you mentioned with other positions, it's a good position to be in if everybody's fit, in terms of trying to fit all the attacking pieces together. I mean, you've got players who not fit yet, as far as we're aware, Traore, Trezeguet, for example. This section is going to be about 2 hours long, but by the time they're fit, trying to think about getting them in the team. But it's in terms of what I can see with Bailey, I can see him being on the bench this week just because of, well, the impact he's having from the bench is almost too good in terms of, you're going to get that half hour from him, so let's hold him back, for the second half, especially in terms of Palace having issues with holding on to a lead. So having Bailey in reserve, I could see potentially that happening. If Bailey's on the bench, then yeah, I think Buendia plays on the right. And yeah, I still think he's going to go for Watkins and Ings again if they are fit, because then you've got the option, as it did on Saturday, for Ings to go out and Watkins to go in the centre. But I think in terms of, if Ings is fit, he's the player we need in that central position, just because he is that goal scorer for us. I know I'm not saying Watkins isn't a goal scorer, but you can't play Danny Ings on the left wing or the right wing. So I think in terms of trying to see if it works as a free, because we haven't really had the opportunity to try it as a free with Watkins on the left and Ings in the centre, and either Bailey or Buendia on the right. So I would give that a go, and I'll step away from the fire in terms of the hot takes that have just been created and see how that goes. But speaking of potential hot takes, you mentioned earlier on that you think Villa are going to win the game, that the fans agree on the Twitter page in terms of the poll. We'll move on to score predictions now. What do you reckon the score's going to be? Or has the last 20 minutes changed your mind and you're going to swerve it to a different result?
I'm still going for a Villa win. I think that we start with the same team that we started with against Brighton. Buendia, Ings and Watkins, because I think Watkins and Buendia will offer more defensively than Bailey would do if he started. And I think that Danny Ings, we can use his experience against younger defenders like Gui, and also, I mean, Joachim Anderson played last year in the Premier League, obviously, and did rather well for Fulham to get his move to Palace from Lyon. They've got, if I remember rightly, they have Tyreek Mitchell at left back, who's a fast left back who likes to get forward. So Buendia will have to keep up with him and make sure that Cash doesn't get overloaded. But I think we'll be able to hurt him again because of experience. Right back for Palace, it tends to be Joel Ward or Nathaniel Klein, doesn't it? If Klein signed a new contract, I can't remember. So Watkins should be able to give Ward a good game. I think that we get a win, and I think it becomes a bit of an emphatic win. I was going to say 3-2 to Villa because I do think that Palace can cause us problems. But as the game goes on, I think we introduce Douglas Luiz, we introduce Bailey as well, and we mix things about a bit. We use our pace, we get forward, we start spraying the passes. And I'm going to go for a 4-2 Villa victory. I wouldn't be surprised if we potentially hit 5. It sounds really daft, but we're waiting. We're waiting to explode. Hopefully with an extra week with Gerrard on the training pitch and McAllister and Beale and them sorting out the positions. especially with the field coaches that talk that Gerrard likes, with certain ones doing attack, defence and midfield as well. And getting his philosophies and ideas into place and his patterns of play, I think we could go and get a few. And I think Palace will try to attack us a little bit too much, and we may very well hit them on the counter attack and get a few goals. I think we scored 2 in the last 10 or 15 minutes again. But yeah, I'm confident that we come away with a nice little 4-2 victory, setting us up nicely for the month ahead, because we've got a few nasty games there: City, Leicester and Liverpool. And I think that's when we start to see the emergence of Leon Bailey starting matches. You start your best players against the best teams. Yes, you should start them every week. But if you can give him the last half an hour against Palace, as you've mentioned, and he has a great cameo, then why not start him against Liverpool? And get Douglas Luiz to channel his inner Stevie Gerrard, play some great crossfield balls, and get him running in and causing problems for the likes of Robertson and Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah, we got as you said, we got City and Leicester before the Gerrard reunion show at Anfield. So plenty of opportunity for Villa players to make a name for themselves in those games. But speaking of opportunities to make a name for yourself, you mentioned the Palace game. You're going 4-2. Obviously, that would be a statement win for Gerrard early on in his managerial career at Villa. Show that he means business. In terms of my prediction, I know fans get a little concerned when I predict Villa to win, because it generally means we don't. Although I did get the score right against Brighton, so I'm pretty pleased about that. But I'm going to retire, from being too positive, which is could be displayed in a wide variety of areas depending who you ask. I think both teams are going to score. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game as well. I think it's going to be 2-2. I can see there being late goals as well, as you mentioned, for Villa. I think it could be a similar story for Palace in terms of not being able to hold on to a lead. But I think there's going to be, we've talked about the attacking players we've got on display and the bench. I think our bench, I agree with you, is going to step up. I mean, we mentioned in terms of the Brighton game, the changes that Gerrard made. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say won the game, really. I mean, it changed things up and, able to get that momentum last 15 minutes, which got us the 2 goals. It's going to be maybe a little less in terms of being too cute in terms of changes against Palace. Because if we've got our best players fit, then it's just going to be a case of, let's get some players with a bit of skill on with 20, 30 minutes to go. So they won't potentially be needing too much outside of the box thinking. It'll be getting the thinking to get the ball into the box, in terms of something we did quite well against Brighton on Saturday just gone. But I think we're going to keep the unbeaten streak under Gerrard going. High scoring game options, but I'm going to go for a draw, which will probably be a sigh of relief to the listeners, and they'll be booking in the away win on their football pools coupons, if such a thing still exists.
Well, as wins are rare for you to predict for the Villa, and that's fortunate for us, really. Apart from last weekend, fair play, you got the 2-0 right. Something I haven't predicted for a little while, and I'm quietly confident this weekend, providing he starts. Danny Ings is going to score. I've seen him scoring a penalty. I said it against Watford. I said it against Newcastle that he'd score, and he did it in both of those. I don't think I've predicted it since, from what I can remember. I think Danny Ings scores this weekend, and I do see us rattling in 4. I know it sounds a bit, mate, you're a bit too confident about Steven Gerrard, but we've got to do it somewhere. This is Steven Gerrard's time to shine. It's his revolution, if you like, to really go and show what he can do. He doesn't need to audition for the Liverpool job. He needs to, and I think this is the way he's seeing it publicly anyway, is he needs to do a very good job for Aston Villa. Then providing he can do that job for Aston Villa, then the sky's the limit for him. And if in 3 years' time Liverpool comes available or England becomes available, then he's obviously done a great job for us. But I think he hits the ground running. I think he gets a second win, and then going into that Man City game, he gives us all a little bit of belief that we might be able to get a result against them, and that Matty Cash might be able to absolutely floor Jack Grealish.
Well, there's certainly going to be plenty of plot line, shall we say, ahead of that Man City game, which we will be discussing fully in depth in terms of our Man City preview podcast to come during the course of the next week after we've all seen what's gone on at Palace. In terms of, you heard it here first, Ings to score, Villa to win 4-2. Get yourself onto your betting provider of choice and tell them Talk of the Trinity sent you. We'll only take, 10% of the winnings. I think that's fair enough, in terms of if that one comes in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or you can get me a Villa home shirt. Somebody can if they want to, not club it all together. And that'd be fine. You'd like a home or away shirt as well, wouldn't you? So you can have one also.
I'll take one if it comes from your sweet gambling winnings. I think, what a better way to spread the cheer. And speaking of a way to spread the cheer, brings us nicely to what we've been doing during the course of this podcast, spreading the Villa cheer in respect of Gerrard's first win as Villa manager against Brighton. Will's predicting good things for Palace game on Saturday, so the cheer is going to continue. So that leaves me to wrap up the podcast. Thanks to Connor for joining us earlier on. Great to have him on and him publicising ability counts. And as he said, we're going to be doing a full podcast on that and his journey later on in the season. But it was really great to have him on in terms of giving us, kind of an insight into what he's been doing, and hopefully he's enjoying his ice cream currently. What a better way to spend your evening than listening to this podcast and enjoying some ice cream. I think you're a fan of strawberry, Will, I think, from recollection, or have I made that up?
Mate, strawberry ice cream and also salted caramel, right? There's nothing salty about me or this podcast either. But no, I'll be listening back probably to get one of those viewer figures up for us with some ice cream. But where will I be listening back, Baz? Well, I'll be listening back on Apple, Google, Amazon, Deezer, Stitcher, Spotify, then Apple, I think, are the favourites. Could also be watching the video and wondering why I'm wearing a hat indoors on YouTube as well, and would have got to have seen our captain Connor on that as well. And of course, if you're not sure of where to listen to us, even though you're actually listening to us now, spoiler alert, you can always look at us on Twitter at Talk of the Trinity, and that gives you all the information that you need there, doesn't it? And as you say, we've got some exciting podcasts coming up. But what are we going to be doing on the next podcast, Bud?
Well, hopefully we'll be talking about a Villa victory at Crystal Palace, and we'll be one step closer to retirement with our gambling winnings. Having brought shirts for herself, hopefully. We'll also be previewing the Man City game, which, that's got some things going on. I think in terms of plot lines that down at Villa Park at the, and also a midweek game as well under the lights always gives that extra dimension. And we may or may not have a special guest with us to talk about the game and all things that are Villa related. Spoiler alert, we may not, but you're gonna have to tune in to find out, in terms of that. But in the meantime, thanks very much for listening to this episode of the podcast. We really appreciate the support with all the listens, likes, subscribes, retweets, any other phrases that I've missed in terms of social media. And, as Will said, check us out on the Twitter page at Talk Trinity. We'll be regularly running polls, questions, queries, looking to get your views, get yourself involved. And in the meantime, hope you enjoy the game on Saturday.
Cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. And as always, up the Villa.